Awesome. So for today, I think there's a slightly different structure that I was hoping we could run with, just because I think we have an influx of folks who are joining, and I want to make sure we can address the issues that came up over the last 2 weeks. So the first thing I just wanted to do is quickly, at least make sure we all have alignment on what was in the original FIP for like, what is the points of Filecoin Plus? Two, then dive into some of the bigger issues that popped out over the last 2 weeks. Hopefully we can do a quick summary of the arguments so far, and then like have a dedicated at least 10 minutes, 10 to 15 for each one to talk through maybe the rationale and the reasoning on each side and try to come to some sort of consensus. Hopefully, if we're efficient, that will still give us some time at the end for open questions and discussions. And then hopefully there's also space to talk about like action items on how we can improve this process overall. Because this is a community governance project, I think figuring out how we can increase trust and transparency is super crucial. So it'd also be a great opportunity to get feedback on what we can do better. So maybe to kick it off, for folks who were unaware, the aim of Filecoin Plus, so why Filecoin Plus? So the aim of Filecoin is to be a protocol to enable reliable and useful decentralized storage. And Filecoin Plus aims to enable this by adding a social layer of trust on top of the Filecoin network to plug into the crypto economic model of Filecoin to basically incentivize clients to participate in the network. And if you take a look, I've linked to the original introduction that Juan gave about 10 months ago in May of 2020 at the 15-minute mark, explaining like the rationale behind Filecoin Plus. But yeah, it's a community-driven process. The aim is to have a set of people, to one, have it be governed by the community, two, to have a set of semi-trusted fiduciaries that are helping allocate trust on the network, and three, for that trust to be used to help incentivize and accelerate the adoption of Filecoin and the usage of the network. And the way that that's supposed to happen is because Filecoin or clients are empowered, ideally that can be used to heavily incentivize miners to work with clients to take their deals and to increase the services that are enabled on Filecoin. And so inside the original FIP, if you look under the incentive section, you can sort of, I've copied and pasted a paragraph, but that was the original intention of what is the point of this process. It's to basically help the network as a whole incentivize and subsidize client activity. And doing so in a way that is compliant with the principles that are laid out in the original FIP. And so I think a few things to call out as explicit non-goals and things that we can then say like, is this process working or not? It is explicitly a non-goal for Filecoin Plus to enable anyone to just print money. I think that was a meme that we saw floating around. And especially for notaries who are elected through a community-driven process, they're supposed to act as fiduciaries of a network, and if they act improperly, they should be punished. Those are things that are encoded in this protocol as well. And so I think it's explicitly a non-goal. We should be very clear that the goal is not to enable anyone specifically to print money. The second thing that is a non-goal is that it should not be the case that this is implicitly or explicitly saying like Filecoin Plus is supposed to bias towards one size of miner over another. There is like a practical implication that small miners tend to benefit from Filecoin Plus given how the allocation of power works, but it's not explicitly designed to say like this is supposed to prefer one over another. I think it's worth pausing here and just calling out. One of the big topics of discussion in the Slack channel was, do we need this process at all? And I think that's a super valuable discussion. What I will propose is we reserve some time at the end to talk about alternative economic models and ways that we can further that discussion. Given that we have so many topics to go through today, and given that Filecoin Plus is already encoded in FIP3, I want to make sure we at least have time to address the things that are operationally the most contentious right now. So at least for those things, there is clarity on how things can move. But I think we should discuss and like have the, I don't know if Joe is on this call. I think I see him, Joe G. I saw he and some others had some proposals. I think Elio is part of that as well. And so we should have some time to chat about that as well. But I wanted to make sure we're at least aligned at the high level on like what was the original intention behind Filecoin Plus. And so maybe it's worth then talking about what came out over the last 2 weeks and then hopefully moving through these case by case. And so maybe the 4 questions here, and maybe there are others that we haven't captured. This was going through the Slack channel, but I think these were the top 4 big questions. And so I was hoping maybe we could spend, we could have one person summarize for each question, and then we could talk about, or like debate basically how we can come to some sort of consensus about what's reasonable for each of these different items. Maybe Deep, do you want to?
Yeah, I can totally talk about the first one. Yeah, and then we can have others step in for the others. So I guess stemming off of what you just talked about, right? Like, what are the motivations of Filecoin Plus? Why is it important? How is it structured? At the end of the day, like you mentioned this on the previous slide, and we use this phrasing a lot, which is notaries are meant to be fiduciaries of the network. What that actually means is that notary's best interests should be aligned with the incentives of the overall success of the network, like of Filecoin overall, in its ability to serve its need. So as a notary, when you're granted DataCap, you're effectively being trusted by the rest of the ecosystem, the rest of the community to say, hey, like based on this rubric that we think is a reasonable way in which we can identify people that should act with the right incentives, these are the people we entrust to get to know clients, do the required due diligence on behalf of the rest of the ecosystem, and make a decision on whether or not these clients are worthy of receiving DataCap to then take to miners and get good deals so that we can ensure that there's good usability of the network. And we're seeing a lot of like content around the idea of like DataCap is like a fluid, like secondary exchangeable currency type thing almost, where people are looking at ways in which they can buy and sell DataCap, and we'll be discussing some of those topics later on. But specifically, as a notary, there should be no case in which you're selling your DataCap to clients. Like you were chosen to do the due diligence. Your interests should be aligned with those of the network. If you feel like you don't want to do that, then that's a different conversation. And maybe that's something to keep in mind for those of you that are looking to become notaries in the future. But this is absolutely not in line with, I think, the principles of the program. And generally, this should be a non-controversial statement. If it is a controversial statement, this first bullet, then I think I would request you, if you're in the audience right now, raise your hand or unmute yourself and let's chat about it. But what I think is, yeah.
Maybe 2 things. I do think, like, so one, first, I'd be curious if anyone actually has a counterpoint to that. I do think we should talk for people who are newer. There is like a process that is inside of this. And I think so there is a process to file disputes. I think someone had asked, so if someone does something bad, what are the options? Right now, there is a dispute and like audit mechanism where basically anyone can file. I think if you go to the Notary governance repo I can put a link in the Slack channel. There is a process for filing an issue. I think specifically for the complaints against notaries, if this is a thing that someone does observe, and I think this is where anyone can report and like whistleblow on this. We have a process for removing DataCap from notaries, like root key holders. Basically, like root key holders can just reset the DataCap of a notary. So it is possible to remove the DataCap if this is a thing that is happening. But maybe prior, does someone have an argument for why they think this? I think, as far as I understand, everyone's in agreement on this, but is anyone arguing the counterpoint that notaries should be able to sell DataCap?
Yeah, happy to have that conversation. I don't really see. Oh, ZX, you unmuted. I'm trying to see if anybody else is unmuting and wants to share anything. ZX, if you want to share something, go for it.
Yeah, I think this is largely like a false claim by people who maybe we misunderstand how things works. Like there's no proof or anything remotely close and evidence of like a notary selling DataCap. And I also, based on how the process works, I also think there is no incentive for notaries to do so.
Do you want to explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, because in the selection process, one big part of that is like, because the program is pretty new. So like the reason why we care in the rubric, there is this like token exposure is that when there's a large enough exposure or people who have been involved in the ecosystem for a long time, like the dominant incentive is to actually make Filecoin more valuable instead of like cheating on this kind of small, like tiny weeny gains. So there is like a misconception there, but I think like us as a community, we need to work together to like level up our understanding.
I do think as a separate note, I think I've raised this before. I do think there is a reasonable argument also for how the way the rubric works is it successively, after several iterations of proper execution, like it will allocate or enable a notary to get more data cap after they like reapply and get selected multiple times. I do think that is something where, like, especially if one of the concerns is that early on there isn't a lot of data about any notaries, and so one thing that we collectively could do is just change the rubric to lower the amounts that are initially allocated to make it a much more laborious process to get more data cap, which means that even if you wanted to cheat, it would take a long time to like get to a meaningful amount of data cap that is like worth cheating over. And maybe that's something that I think that's inside of one of the other issues, but maybe worth discussing. I do see a comment here. Nelson said, why is Fil Plus not a mechanism to favor small miners over the top miners? I think it should be a lever that allows the network to foster decentralization and balance out the natural advantages of economies of scale favoring the top miners.
Let me respond to that. Like, so I think the Filecoin Plus can do that, but it's not like an, I mean, in the principle, you want to promote decentralization, but like we also shouldn't feel like, because at the end of the day, it's about delivering that, making Filecoin more useful, and then delivering the product and services that will attract more clients. And then in practice, like I think there's a very clear path where like we can have like community like Filecoin Plus clients storing public data set and favoring smaller miners, but it's just not an explicit goal.
Extent Matrix have a suggestion, like we could build like a marketplace instead of placing a limit to market cap. For those who have extra, they can sell it on the platform, and for those who need more can buy it. It's like a marketplace exchange. So it's a win-win situation for everybody.
I assume you mean between clients?
Yeah. So you get real clients that way.
Yeah, I think there've been a couple of different projects that have mentioned doing something similar that have come up in the last couple of weeks. I think the third big bullet in this page, which is the what is inbounds for clients, like that's probably where we should have that conversation, because that's covered in issue 66 as well. I certainly have some opinions about it. I think other people have other opinions about it too. JV, do you want to talk about it now, or do you want to scope this? Because I think it is a very good point that Dr. Anstern is bringing up, and we should obviously address it in this call.
Yeah, this way is like you get more real solid clients instead of just empty mining data.
Well, theoretically, it should be we should be getting real solid clients, because notaries are doing a lot of due diligence to ensure that the people getting the data cap in the first place are legitimate use cases, right? So I think the value proposition, at least for me, from what you're describing, is effectively in the case that like data cap is about to go get wasted because it's not being efficiently used by that client, or the client over requested data cap, for example. This gives an opportunity to the network to calibrate.
Yeah, so you can exchange. People that need more can get it from people that have have too much and not to go wasted. So it's a balance.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth discussing. JV, you want to talk about it now, or like maybe?
Well, so maybe if we can go slightly in order. So one of the things that did come up was people had asked about expectations of notaries, and I think Fei Yan was one of the ones who had raised a question about like having, I don't know if Fei Yan's on the call, having made some like issues that ended up getting orphaned, and I think. For a number of folks, they had mentioned that they had had a hard time getting responses from notaries, and I wonder maybe this is bridging a little bit into the next section as well. But I wonder if there's like maybe some SLAs or something that we can like define here for for people who file issues. What are the sort of expectations maybe they can expect? And I wonder if, for the folks who are notaries that are on the call, maybe if you could comment on what your experience has been like so far. Oh, that went too far. What your experience has been like so far. And then maybe any thoughts you have on, if there's maybe some sort of SLAs that we could put in place.
this would be in terms of responsiveness to get that data cap out, right? Just to be
I
explicit.
don't think it has to necessarily, my 2 cents as a not notary, is not that it has to be about like getting it out, but more about like,
addressing the issues.
yeah, basically it's just like making sure that there's like some response. So there's like movement on the tickets. So if someone's filed a ticket, they know that it's not just like being orphaned. And then maybe we should also have a process of like servicing orphaned issues. So if someone's like filed an issue and it hasn't gotten any attention, at least making sure that it's like on the radar of a notary or being like assigned to someone else. It feels like some of those things might be able to help smooth out, at least from the client side, the expectation of the process. I don't know what folks' thoughts are. I saw Philip had unmuted briefly.
Yeah, I think my point was that I think I'm a little bit more critical towards having specific SLAs, just because it will be super difficult to actually hold people accountable, notaries accountable. So I think it should be sort of like a more open trust-based system where folks, I think also over time as the program evolves, there could be sort of like a reputational layer on top of that. There could be some kind of like scoring and some kind of like more fluid between kind of notary, being awarded new data cap versus kind of like being kicked out of like the notary program. But I think, imposing very strict hard rules without kind of like having a clear enforcement layer or mechanism seems like adding more complexity. But that's my point.
Curious to hear from other notaries as well if they have an opinion.
I do think maybe then we should have a process though for like, how do we surface orphaned issues? Like, so in the event someone doesn't respond, what should clients be doing? Like, I mean, I have an opinion here. I'm curious if, like, from a notary, would you prefer having the client like reassign it to someone else, or like, should they ping you on Slack? Like, what's a reasonable path?
Well, again, if you have a platform, they both sides have the freedom, to choose. Like you don't just assign to someone else, but you get to choose who you want to work with, or sell it to, or buy it from, or.
Well, so sorry. In this specific case, I'm talking about like a client who's looking for DataCap for their use case. I'm picking on Fayan just because they had commented in the Slack channel about this, where like they had requested something from Philip, they didn't get a response for a while because we had switched repos. And so I wonder, like, is it reasonable? Like, would notaries be upset if they got pings in Slack? Like, what's the right way for a client to maybe surface that they have an issue that just hasn't gotten attention?
Maybe open to it, that anybody can answer, not just Filecoin people, but everybody who has to answer is able to respond.
Jonathan?
Oh.
Can you, yeah, Julian
Yeah, we
speaking,
hear
can you
you.
hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think the client can apply to another notary. That's it. Just open a new issue to a new notary. Are we just talking about allocating DataCap?
Yes, that's it. That's the scope of the conversation.
I mean, so if Philip, I don't know, is not available or is not answering fast enough, they can open a new issue to me. I mean, that's fine. Just explaining why they are applying here. I'm always asking, do you have already open or have any DataCap from another notary? If they say yes, usually I said that you should go through this one. But actually, if they explain that is out of DataCap or is out of allocation, sorry, or is not responding, I mean, I can handle this, or I can ping directly Philip to see what's going on, what's happening. I think it's something we should deal together as a, as a group. all the notaries together.
I feel like we should review FIP 12, which defines, duplicated applications, or like not duplicated, but like the clients can apply for DataCap with different notaries just to resolve this. It's stated in FIP 12.
I think at least what I wrote in FIP 12, basically that was trying to cover like race conditions. So to summarize FIP 12, if anyone has gotten DataCap right now as a client, you can't get more DataCap to that specific address, which is kind of not great UX. And especially if you're a Web3 developer, that can end up leading to some bad architecture decisions. One of the conditions is basically like if a client has applied to multiple notaries, what might happen, they may get like an over allocation of DataCap. But it doesn't actually, I think, resolve this specific question. I think, I don't know if other people have thoughts, but I like Sonic's suggestion. Perhaps maybe as a client, if you can just link to the other like orphaned issue as well, or maybe close the original one if you're tired of waiting with the original notary. Maybe it's worth then moving to the next one, unless other folks have. What if the notaries denied the clients? I think, that's Jiao's. I think if notaries deny the clients, I would say it's worth just like putting that as a comment in the issue and then just like closing the ticket. I think one thing to keep in mind is as a notary, especially like all notaries have their own like self-defined allocation plans, but it's totally reasonable to just give a smaller amount of DataCap than what was requested. So if someone requests 5 terabytes and you think it's like questionable, you could also just give like 100 gigabytes or something to see like what do they do with the DataCap to make sure it's like actually what they claimed. To read out Elio's question. If you really want to continue Filecoin Plus as it is, I would personally go for a much stricter due diligence. There will be, it will take longer to allocate DataCap, yes, but it will be much more fair. I think, Ilya, that's reasonable. Jiao asks, are they allowed to apply through other notaries? I think so. So in the current construction, notaries are supposed to have their own allocation plans and their own levels of due diligence. So everyone submitted their own application with the questions and the frameworks that they would use. And so I think it's reasonable that some, as an example, there's an automatic notary. So they will just hand out a small amount of gigabyte DataCap to everyone who has a GitHub address. And so I think, yeah, I don't know if other people have thoughts, but I think as constructed, to make sure we touch on the other ones.
Yeah, I think we can keep going if we've addressed all the questions in chat.
So this actually maybe is a great bridge. Hide asks, before we talk about other notaries, shouldn't we move from 1 to 2 to 10 plus notaries in Europe first, which is a beautiful dovetail into the second bullet point about DataCap scarcity. Maybe Zex, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So I think some of our perception is being shaped by like what we observe, and then like and based on our last round allocation, there isn't really like a scarcity per se about DataCap, but there's allocation scarcity. Maybe it makes sense for us to take time to like diagnose like why is it that it takes us like a while to allocate the DataCap. Potentially there could be like the demand is not very high, there aren't that many clients, right? Or it could be like the technical difficulties, like you have to jump through different hoops that that slows down the allocation, or our notaries being like too conscious, given all the pressure that like, given all the pressure the community is mounting, or client just having a difficult time. I talked to a few clients, right? They're navigating to through the DataCap application process. So maybe we need to have better documentation, like make the website more visible. We should publicize the website maybe like twice a day. And And also, do we need like more interaction time? I also feel like we can use like the Filecoin Plus channel more as the community. So I feel like there are some level of questions here of like diagnosis before we talk about like, let's say adding more notaries and so on.
Yeah, I just switched my screen. I don't know if folks have Lotus Shed installed. I think if you have Lotus installed, you can do make Lotus Shed and it will give you this. You can actually see the DataCap that's being, or that currently resides with any of the notaries just by running this. So we actually have, these are all in bytes, but I think for most of the notaries, they have most of their DataCap still remaining. And so maybe it'd be good to hear from some of the notaries if maybe we could get some feedback on what's been your experience. Like, I think one question might be like, what are the blockers? And then the other might be if you have maybe any learnings. I don't know if people have found it to be unexpectedly burdensome, and maybe those are things that could be instructive as we think about like, how do we unblock DataCap scarcity, quote unquote scarcity.
I know we have a couple of notaries here. It would be good to get some opinions.
Yeah, I can start, Julian.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I received in total, I think, 13 requests. Just 4 of them were like something that was like properly, I mean, that are real requests actually. I think I've got 4 of them, and just so I ask additional question, and at the end I just get 2 people answering me. So I'm just, I mean, I have a lot. I mean, 10 terabyte is not a lot, but actually it's more than what I need right now to allocate what the clients are requesting, because I just have a few clients. I think the question is more, but we will discuss it later on when we have very, very, very large clients coming. We may have some problems about the data cap and allocation and what. But for now, I think most of the thing I received is quite small, and a few terabytes is more than enough.
So people are just not they're just not responding to the follow-up questions that you have?
Yeah.
Okay, so that doesn't seem like something wrong with the tooling there. Not something systemic, I think, that we can course
Yeah, because
correct
actually
for.
what we capture with the template through the File Plus application is really high-level questions.
Yeah.
But when you start to engage them by asking questions like, you have to confirm what type of data you've got, how you can you please provide all the CIDs in the chat and so on, in the issue, you know, in the comments, so
Right.
we can dig and we can audit and so on. That just disappear.
Okay. Any other notaries here that have an opinion or have similar experiences?
I see Joe just unmuted. Do you want to go, Joe?
I just was going to make, sorry, one comment that I see 70 open cases in GitHub for DataCaps. That doesn't kind of match up with what I'm hearing.
Well, it's possible that there's questions open in them, so not necessarily either case. But yeah, I agree with you that I think we've heard this a lot of times, that there's not a lot of DataCap circulating, and so it's true that something is certainly not moving as we had hoped or expected. And so I think it's important to figure out, maybe from the notary's perspective, if something can be improved in the tooling or something like that. I think in Julian's case, it sounds like maybe not the case, but maybe other notaries have other opinions as well. It would be good to hear your experiences.
Maybe right before we give Zhao the mic, one comment, maybe notaries, if there are situations where you ask a question and a client hasn't responded for some period of time, maybe it's worth actually closing out those issues, just so, as Joe points out, it becomes easier even for the community for us to get a sense of how many of these are like actually like pending requests that are just waiting for someone to respond versus things that are sort of like completely like you've already responded and the client's just abandoned the thing. And then maybe we can go for the hand. Zhao, do you want to go?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi. So this is Jahal from Bamboo Capital. So we are notaries, and we actually haven't assigned any, data caps yet. So there are like two. One main reason is that so we are based in China, and we are still having like Chinese, Lunar Happy New Year holiday right now. So we haven't done anything yet. And secondly, so the Filecoin Plus project is just launched, and we haven't. So we are still formulating our like internal rules on like allocating data caps and everything else, and how we should publish everything, and we need to like process thing first. So I think in the end of this month, after the Chinese New Year, after everyone back to work, we're gonna process everything very quickly, and those clients will get their response very quickly.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. That's helpful, and happy Lunar New Year to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other notaries that have opinions or can share thoughts? Like if there is an opportunity to improve the tooling or improve like ways in which we can do follow-ups, like this is a great time to raise that, because this can lead to potential work or ideas for people in the ecosystem that want to contribute in terms of what they can build. So please don't be shy about sharing your experiences and what you think could be useful.
Maybe I can also read out Nelson's question from a little while ago. Do all the notaries feel they are clear about their role and operating guidelines? Do you feel like some of the clients that you're responding to are not qualified?
Is silence yes or is silence no?
Maybe putting people on the spot.
Yeah.
I can only talk about myself, and yeah, I think I'm fairly clear on the role and responsibilities.
Yeah, Julian speaking, same for me.
Maybe
okay.
maybe a better question is, Nelson, do you have any specific like examples, or is it worth like talking to anybody in particular, or was it just a general sort of maybe this is why things are moving slower?
Well, I'm actually interested in maybe potentially asking as a client, even though I'm a minor, but to apply as a client, and then I'd like to know if asking for DataCap, would it be a difficult process? I mean, I tried at one point. I just queried it, see if I could actually apply, but I didn't go very far with it.
Mm-hmm.
And because I can see that some notaries may think that's a conflict of interest, being a minor and trying to apply for as a client as well. But if there's actual data set that I want to actually load into a Filecoin network, can I get DataCap pretty easily?
I think to give a general answer, and I'll let notaries specifically give their own. So I think everyone sort of defined their own process. And so I think it sort of varies across the notaries. But I think the general rule is like higher allocations require much more scrutiny than lower ones, which is why like if you wanted a very small amount of DataCap with, and I'll just put this in the chat, people should go try using this if they want to give it a go. Like the automatic verifier will give you a small amount for free. But I see Sonic also unmuted, so maybe he can give the real take.
Yeah, so just to answer to Nelson, I allocated one DataCap for now, and I'm going to allocate another one in the next 2 days because I went through all the questions I have got with this client. I think for a few gigs to 1 terabyte, let's say, we are not. I don't think it's very complex because we are not digging I mean, we are not going that far. I mean, what we want to do is to first let the client deal, and then we can start digging and auditing and go much more deeper on what exactly they are doing with the DataCap. But I mean, we want this process to work, and I mean, personally, I think it's good to let the clients consume and see how the using verified deals is working and so on, and to accompany them to bring more data to the network.
I just have a question. Who would I actually apply to in North America? Is there a list?
Yeah, so if you go to plus.phil.org, it should list by geography. I think if I remember correctly, the ones in North America, Dr. Shin, who's on the call, textile, Fleek, performative, I think are the four that can give you like larger allocations, and then the automatic notary is there as well, which is the first link I put in the chat.
And in terms of the guidelines, if I got a little confused because when the slingshot race was going, there was a lot of the talk amongst the developer or the people participating, saying that you have to actually split the data up, to different miners. Would that be the same case for applying as a client for DataCap, just without regard to this slingshot?
Yeah, like the rules for Slingshot is on relevance with the whole Filecoin Plus system. Like Slingshot is just a separate computation, so the rules doesn't apply for the whole network.
So technically, if I were to get DataCap and I wanted to actually store most of the data that I got the DataCap for on my own mining rig, that's okay?
And this is interesting. So it's different when you talk about your own versus not your own, and this is a topic that I think we talked a little bit about in the last call.
Really good.
Yeah, the consensus was trending in a direction, and correct me, folks, if I'm wrong, but the consensus is generally in the direction that we need to come up with some sort of reasonable limit for what that number looks like within some reasonable bounds. Like it is probable that people will want to make deals with themselves. Okay, if that's the case, then there should be reasonable effort that they try to find other miners, and if not, then like maybe up to like 20% or something can be self-dealt. But I don't know if we like had a final conclusion on that yet.
Yeah, I think that would be good for at least a ballpark guideline. Because I mean,
I think
if it's completely free for us to do what we want with it, I'm fairly certain that a lot of clients who are actually miners as well would just allocate to their own mining, either their own mining rigs, or maybe they have other, split off. Larger miners have many different rigs, and they can just allocate to those.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Yeah, I think one of the things that came out of the last call regarding that was, especially for the notaries, like part of it is if they are following, and I think for almost everyone who had their allocation plan, there's like some successive thing of how they step up the allocations, but sort of the same way the original rubric allocates small amounts of DataCap to notaries and then increments upon good faithful execution. I think the same should be, most people already like self-define that inside of their own allocation plans. And so hopefully one of the things that they're looking for, and a thing that like if they put it in their allocation plan and then they don't follow through, that they could get audited / a dispute filed against them for, is if they aren't actually doing the due diligence to see like, so where do these deals end up? I think Sonic had mentioned that one of the things he asked for is like the deal IDs. And so, yeah.
But is there like a general rule that most notaries are following? Like if you try to self-deal past 30%, then you're going to get rejected on your application. I mean, I have, as I said, if we leave it completely open, most people will probably truthfully just say, I'm going to allocate most of it to myself.
But like, how can you govern that though? How can you know if the client like who is running the client is the same person running the miner? Like how, yeah, I'm just wondering how can you govern that?
I think there's two cases, right? There's the case where someone explicitly says that I am a miner, I am applying for DataCap, I'm planning on storing some with myself. And then like, I think having an agreed upon like threshold, I think this is actually going to bridge into the next question, which is what is in bounds for clients. I think that's like one path. The other is like you're a sneaky subversive person and you are a miner, but you choose not to disclose it. You pretend to be a client and then you plan on storing it. And so I think the former question is one that I think is about standards for like what is inbounds for clients. I think this naturally falls into that question. I think the latter one, maybe we'll actually get to in the fourth one, which is like the tooling that's being built and like how do we analyze on chain to see like when are people being super sneaky, which, yeah.
And I want to add a little bit. I think like Nelson, when like a client apply, my understanding is they need to specify what the data is for, and whether it's like it's public data set, maybe the scrutiny will be lower. If it's everything is encrypted, then like okay, then there's like more scrutiny. And then I think like Sonic mentioned that you need to provide like a DOID as well. And then the second piece is the allocation plan for the client, right? Like if let's say I'm planning to allocate, like I think Deep mentioned like 20% to myself, if let's say that is something that the community deem as reasonable, and then the rest, let's say it's public data, so Wikipedia, I want to like allocate, my allocation plan is for like small miners in the region. That's something that we can start experimenting with, and then and see how that goes. But of course, like this will be up to the notary. Different notaries may have like different policy and guidelines in their allocation plan because they are the ones doing the due diligence at the end.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, ZX, that you're bringing up for instance, the public information like a Wikipedia. I think that's something that fits into the original idea of Filecoin, and it should be, we should use this opportunity with Filecoin Plus to try to advance that. It is larger miners also have their their own agendas, but for smaller miners, a lot of us are just waiting for real clients to put data on our systems, and we don't want to lose out just because we're not able to create our own data sets or find our own data sets.
Maybe
Yeah,
we should talk about something to incentivize clients to come. As Nelson just mentioned, we're just waiting for deals to come in, but not much is happening. So maybe it's just an idea to incentivize clients in general to find these notaries and find DataCap and join.
Yeah, for instance, Starling is actually applying, I think, right, for DataCap, but they haven't gotten any yet. And
They haven't applied yet. I just talked to Jonathan
No,
Doden
they
and
didn't
walked them
apply.
through.
Yeah.
I walked them through the entire interface like literally 2 hours ago.
Okay.
So hopefully that problem will be solved pretty quickly.
No, I mean, I think they're going to have an interesting case. Don't they have like petabytes of DataCap that they need? And so I think, Sonic, you had mentioned that you'd talked to them as well.
Yeah, exactly. Is it in the agenda today, on the agenda today, Jonathan?
I actually had forgotten to put that in, but we should talk about it in the open discussion section because that is an important one of like when there's these like big projects, how do we handle the fact that we may not have enough DataCap in the world for that?
Yeah.
Just one last bit. I think like the feature the client requested might matter too, right? Like if it's public data and then like the client will request miner to produce to enable fast retrieval, like I think of it as like the early phase of the program. We are basically showcasing like all the amazing data that we can store on Filecoin and how people can use Filecoin. That's why we're proposing like Filecoin Plus day before. So I think like we kept saying this, that DataCap is not meant to be scarce, and I think it's meant to be a lever to enable us to do to make the network more useful.
Yeah, on that point, I was wondering, Deep, you said you spoke with the Starling, Jonathan
Yes, I spoke to him earlier today.
Did you mention to him about whether he needs fast retrieval, because that actually will increase the amount of space we need as miners to host. So like basically the capacity to be.
That's right. Yeah, that is one of the things we talked about. So this kind of goes into the conversation on like what ZX is saying is like, what is the strategy for like bigger clients in general? And depending on their needs, like both how do we get the data across and how do we get the data back? I think his initial take was it kind of depends. He's got two types of data that he's looking to store. So depending on which one he chooses to go with in the short run, it will change his demand and need for faster retrieval or not. Because he's got one data set that's more archival, and for that one he doesn't really need it. And then he's got another data which is like the actual like uncompressed large video files. And if he does go down that path, then he will probably want fast retrieval. But those are in slices of 32 gigabytes at a piece. So it's not like it's too massive, but you're absolutely right that it will change how much size on disk and how much available space you have.
And a lot of what he's doing right now is just scoping out his project, because he's still figuring out with like with us, the Filecoin Foundation, with PL and Stanford and Harvard. He's got a bunch of like people working together exactly what things he's going to do.
He's a popular guy.
He is.
Maybe it's worth. Oh, Nelson, I see you're unmuted. Was there something else you wanted to throw on?
No, thanks.
Maybe it's worth moving to this third one, which I think was maybe the spiciest of the things in the Slack channel, which is what is inbounds for clients. And so I think this is where issue 66 came up, which Charles had originally kicked off. Let me try to summarize, though I will also tap folks to maybe like rephrase if I get it wrong. I don't want to misrepresent anyone's arguments here. Basically, the question is, for clients who receive DataCap, what are reasonable rules for operation? I think there's like 3 cases that I think have been made. There is one, which is clients, the advantage of DataCap is for them to be able to store with miners. And so it should basically end there. So one argument is clients should not be able to monetize DataCap at all. Another argument is that clients should be able to use that power to increase services. And so payment might exist in quotes, but payment might take the form of services. So fast retrieval or free retrieval, if that were possible in the protocol, things like that. And then the third argument is that it's a totally free market. And so, yeah, well, maybe not totally, there might be 4. It's a market where there's supply and demand. When clients are in power, where there is like fewer clients relative to the total storage, clients should be able to wield that power appropriately. And then there's like potentially like, how does one define what appropriate is in that context? I know that was a very superficial definition of those like high level versions. Does anyone want to restate any of those 3? I think, well, I don't want to call people out. I see some names that had opinions in the Slack, but maybe I'll open the floor up for folks who want to reposition that discussion. If you don't want to unmute to maybe like restate the argument, maybe in the chat, how do people feel about like, maybe is there anything else that people want to add to that discussion? Yes.
I also think this is some, oh, so sorry.
Go ahead, please, go ahead, yeah.
No, I was just going to say this is also somewhat tangentially related, not tangentially, it's directly related to what Dr. Anshin was referencing as well. With regards to, can DataCap become like a tradable resource between clients, for example? Because it's kind of the same thing. It's just like in one case, are you selling it to a miner to incentivize a deal? In another case, are you selling it to another client? And what does that actually look like? So if she has anything to share, it would be good to hear as well. But yes, go for it.
Yeah, let me just. So I think we have this consensus that clients are requesting for features. That's totally okay, right? Let's first establish a consensus on that level. Are we all on the same page? Like client wants more features on miner, and miner can choose not to take it, but like some miners may be willing to support that, right? I feel like that's something that's pretty uncontroversial so far. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Joe unmuted.
Oh, I just think it's a bit of a slippery slope. If you're, what's a service and what is money? I think it's all a little bit naive to think that that you can trade money like that or services without influencing notaries and clients and it getting a little bit sleazy.
Right, about notaries, we already talked about that. We don't think there's anything with notary. It's just mostly about clients and minors now, right?
Again, I would say that it's a little bit naive to think that that's all above board and no problem there.
So, and also let's be very concrete for the service. Let's talk about let's say fast retrieval, just like the most concrete example. Like client can request for fast retrieval as a condition. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's worth, especially on the on Joe's point about how do we ensure what is required to end up getting trust in this process. I think that might be the bullet point 4, where what do we need to know in order to trust or not trust the system. But I see Reba has a hand.
I just wanted to say something on the technological front of fast retrievals. In general, given the current state of the art of what SDR can do for unsealing, from a technical perspective, I actually very much recommend that you do everything with fast retrieval. Yes, it will take you twice the space for sectors that do contain deals, but the amount of CPU that unsealing burns is way more than offset by you just keeping data in the unsealed state at all times. And in fact, the Lotus that is already in the latest pre-release, and it will definitely be in 1.5 as well, there is an actual configuration option for miners to just set everything to be fast retrieval no matter what the client requested. And we actually are recommending that from a technical perspective.
Sorry, I'm just going to add on to that. It's going to be in 1.4.2 that's going to be released tonight. So we are tagging it right now, and it's in the release note. I will send a note later as well. So it will be supported by default.
Sorry, I think we moved up the stack a bit on the original thing. So I think, ZX, you were making an argument about services. I think Joe flagged that there is naivety if we conflate services and money are somewhat interchangeable. And then also there might be naivety on the notary side, expecting that notaries will not violate the DataCap thing. I think maybe I don't know, do we want to put a pin in that argument and then come back to the trust and transparency? Or do we want to deviate into the trust and transparency bit? Because I think they're both important discussions. Maybe let's assume, let's put a pin in the trust and transparency because that is the next bullet point. Maybe ZX, do you want to finish your argument on the services thing?
Yeah, sure. We only have 3 minutes left, but let's say we establish first that, okay, client can ask for fast retrieval and similar services. And then I think Nelson brought up a good point the other day, so the next question is, okay, so can clients do more, right? In the sense that in the real world for the platform business, it's pretty common for the provider to provide a subsidy. Provide subsidy for people to try out their stuff to overcome the initial switching costs. That's why I personally don't want to just blanket and say we shouldn't allow client to have entered some kind of revenue sharing agreement with the provider. But at the same time, that is entirely up to the provider and client, because you can also make the argument that if the client being too aggressive, miners may not want to take their verified deal, their Filecoin Plus deals. But then there's another argument there, which is that may create this so-called community endorsed way to acquire DataCap. And that's something that we should be aware of. Even though there's nothing stopping kind of an out-of-band kind of agreement, but we may not want to endorse that in the sense that people cannot publicly advertise for selling of DataCap. But if there's any kind of client can do that, but cannot do that. But if let's say miners want to offer it, that might be okay.
I do wonder, is there like, even if it were like guidelines, because I do think one lever here is like notaries can help like enforce to some degree. Like, so let's say if there was a client who tries to price gouge, would it be reasonable to like have, like, it seems to me like one reasonable action is that miners should be able to like publicize this as like a thing that's happening. If it, like, especially if it's like an egregious amount, it seems reasonable. And then like, it does seem like that might factor into a notary, like a notary's decision to allocate more, but.
I have a, I actually am more concerned about the top miners deciding that they want to attract all the DataCap, and then just basically say that they'll pay a certain amount for any DataCap, and all clients will first of all, they already know that these larger players are they have data centers, they're 24/7, they're gonna gravitate towards that. I mean, because it makes sense. If it's free, and actually the clients can actually make money from it, then why not go to the providers, the miners that are doing that? And then the smaller miners, we would have to just basically lower our expectations, or to the beggar thy neighbor dilemma, which at the end, we as small miners, we're going to lose because we don't have the resources.
I would push back on that in the sense that we can have a lot. I mean, as I said, I think our perception might be shaped by what we observe today, in the sense that DataCap allocation pipeline could be a bit slow. But like, sure, let's say in the world where like large miners are offering like a big chunk of their earning to attract this client, first of all, their profitability actually goes down, right? And if these clients are really useful and actually they are beneficial to the network, well, the network stands to gain, everybody else benefits too. At the same time, you can have like other clients going around, because DataCap is not meant to be scarce, and I don't think on the notary level we forbid, we only give DataCap to clients. There's any requirement for client on that front, and then you still can have clients that make deals with like smaller miners.
Well, I mean, is it possible after, let's say we try giving basically a free market a chance and see what the larger miners do, and if we find out that they are deciding to do that, which is completely understandable because we didn't restrict it as a community, how would we stop it in the future? I mean, or do we just want them to centralize and then starve out the competition? It's like what Walmart does and Amazon did.
I don't think the larger miners, the top 20 miners or top 100 miners, I don't think they're here to really store files. Just my 2 cents. They are here for other reasons.
So you don't suspect that they would even participate in paying for DataCap, which is because
if it can make them more money, then sure.
But it will make them more money, because if they decide,
then sure, yeah, of course, of course.
And it'll be done in the shadows, in the background, not publicly, which is the exact opposite of what we're trying to do. So
I'm with Joe here. I do think a lot of people forget that this is the crypto scene, still is, and yeah.
It's very clear there's a crypto scene, and I think but crypto doesn't mean it's always zero sum. I think we are here because we want to make it a win-win, and then we're discussing like different kinds of ways to to make this work. That's why I was thinking. That's why we don't have to. That's why I was thinking proposing we forbid an on advertising level, but there's no real way to really stop that, right?
I don't understand that argument. So you can't advertise. You'd rather take it into the shadows and just backroom deals. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. Either make it public completely so you can see which miners have which data from which notaries and which clients, completely open, or get rid of the 10-to-1 disparity, and that way you do not need to police this, because you're going to lose. You're not going to be able to keep
well, it's
miners
not me.
honest, clients honest, and notaries honest.
Well, it's not me going to lose, or it's not like the protocol is going to lose, it's the community going to lose. We are in this together, right? Like it's infeasible for like, let's say one single party on the network to all do all the policing or analytics. And analytics will likely be the key for successful governance.
If there is a way to cheat and make money, whether or not it's for the better good, it's going to happen, right? That's going to snowball. That's why I'm saying that you can't police this and expect that people are going to do it for the better good.
So I think maybe to make one point here, I think like to Joe's point, I don't know if it's like even with analytics and stuff, there's some point where like someone can fake almost perfect. Like it could also just be the case that you give, like, let's say you were trying to fake this transaction. Joe's a miner, I'm a client. Like I could just have an address that hasn't been sent on chain. I could give that out of band to Joe and then like give him my deal with the address that has been notarized. No one would know I control the other address, or that like Joe could send it like piecemeal over some period of time. Like no one would know, right? Like, so I think to his point, like some of these things won't be like perfectly detectable. And so I think maybe though the thing that is interesting is like so I guess the question is if you can't entirely police all of those actions, what is the actual intent and like what are the actual repercussions that could be there? I do think like one thing that is happening here that is a decision point is if someone is trying to pay for DataCap, if they do it explicitly through advertising and it's like price gouging-y, and we decided as a community that this is something that we like don't want to promote, and it's something that like the notaries can then just shut off allocation to that client, then the client loses out on like a recurring basis because they won't be able to support what, if the vetting has been done correctly, is supposed to be like a legitimate use case. And so like for one allocation, they may get a kickback with whatever miner, but like if they're legitimately trying to store some stuff, that may not actually be the like rational choice. I think the other thing is like the miner that took that deal and like bribed the client, like it doesn't actually like it doesn't improve their profitability in the long term. So if like that sort of action would end up, if that sort of action is going to result in like lower profitability and potentially like non-recurring clients, would that actually be the best rational choice either, I guess? So sorry, that was a incoherent way of saying, although it may not be something that you can explicitly ban, if you set up the incentives properly, you could also through process reduce the likelihood of like bad client actions, in quotes.
I think for smaller miners, and I'm just going to speak for myself, what I'm afraid of is that as a community, we're trying to be fair and we're trying to let everyone have a shot at growing their power. But at the same time, we know that there are disparities between large miners and small miners' capabilities. So Filecoin Plus, as a governance tool, has the ability to somewhat even that out by giving 10 times power to people who are behind or not as big as others. And that's what I thought the intent was. But if there's another mechanism, and I don't think we can fault anybody in terms of the large miners or other any miners in this network, because this is a market, and whoever has the advantage is going to take advantage of that. So, but we need to know that there are certain things we, as a community, we want to decentralize the network. We want to make sure that the information that we're storing is actually useful to someone. It'd be better if it's useful for the general public, but it needs to be. I think we need to really set it out clearly so people can play by the rules. And once we're not going to be playing by the rules, there's penalties to it somehow. I mean, it could be market penalties just inherent in the market system, or it could be, doled out by arbitrators or people that we give power to do that.
That's where my verified miners idea might come in handy.
Do you want to explain that? I actually didn't fully read up on the thread, but I did see that you had written some stuff.
Yeah, just a basic idea, like having verified miners in general, miners that could get rated by other miners, by clients, by paying clients, for example, and there's a power in the rating. Yeah, I'm still writing some stuff down about it, and I need to clean things up, but the
Yeah.
general idea is having verified miners. Yeah.
I thought there was someone writing a tool that actually rated
Yeah.
miners.
I was about to mention that. So kind of
That's Charles.
there is a tool that's being built. We just frame it as sort of like a social network for miners that kind of like adds a reputation layer on sort of the miners. And it would also allow for clients to ultimately provide ratings, other miners to rate other miners and so forth. So that is being built.
Right? Isn't Charles doing the same thing, or is that what you're talking about? Phil Swan.
No, there was another one. Phil Swan is
Okay.
more for doing deals.
The one from
Right, but
consensus,
there's
I think.
but there's a dealing thing in there as well, like a rating thing, I mean.
Yeah, Charles is on, isn't he? I think he could respond to
I
that.
think he had to leave. But I do
Yeah.
think
I think
I
that
think there's
rating
a
actually
few
he's just
efforts.
taking it out of some other database somewhere.
There's a few tools that I think are trying to make that happen. I think Powergate has a reputation module inside of it, though I don't know if anyone's using it. I believe it's either Consensus or Digital Mob is working on a reputation score tool. And then I think as a part of Phil Swan, there's another one as well. And then I think Phil Hub, I don't know if Hal's on the call, but I think they were also working on a platform for that as well.
Build the Labs in India is the team that I'm speaking of. But it's true, there are multiple implementations.
It'd be good actually if maybe something for the foundation to consider if those teams can align on like a standard, which might make it easier to like interoperate with each other.
We're just want to call it. We're 11 over. I think maybe a couple more minutes and then we should call it a wrap, because I also don't want to be unfair to people who couldn't make it to this stage of the participation.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So maybe should we go to the tooling and transparency, because that was the last big topic. I'm going to kick off threads. I know we haven't fully landed on consensus on some of these questions.
Just before we do that, I mean, there were a couple of open questions, like Joji's points and stuff. Are we in consensus to put a pin on those points and let's aim to address them in the next call, or shall we continue offline conversation? It would be good to have some next steps to people, so you can all also do the reflection that you need and come back with some actionable sort of like next steps and ways in which we can ensure that this is set up for success.
Yeah, I'm done. I mean, if you're in Slack, you know what my opinion is. I mean, I think we need to just get rid of that completely. And if the foundation wants to find some big clients to showcase what the network can do, that makes sense to me. But secondary market of data caps and corruption just does not work for me. But thank you.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from, Joe. I think one thing for me, at least this call, has been that that's largely because of the relative scarcity of DataCap, and I think that's probably what needs to change.
But if everyone has a data cap, then it doesn't make sense, right? I mean, you're not going to get the outcome that you like.
I disagree, because in order to receive the data cap, it's because you went through a process where you demonstrated that you had a valid use case on the network. And so, no, I actually don't think it's that bad. If everybody sits down with data cap and every single deal in the network is happening because of data cap, that's not a bad thing. It just means that every deal is happening with a use for the world. And so you're right that it might reduce some of the economic incentive to go chase after deals with data cap, but in and of itself, that doesn't render it useless. It still means we're getting good data about the clients that are coming onto the network and ways in which they're getting to participate on the network.
I mean, for the miners to pay 10-to-1 to bring in clients, I really struggle to understand how you truly believe that that's going to bring in the clients that you're looking for.
So I think this whole like paying thing is tricky, and that's still an open question. Like I'm not necessarily in favor of having a market for DataCap. All I'm addressing is that I don't think it's a bad thing to have DataCap in every deal, because you made the point that, oh, if we have too much DataCap and it's no longer in scarcity, then it's a problem. And what I'm saying is that I don't think that's a problem. I hear you on the market point. I think that's still an open, valid discussion that's worth discussing in Slack, in a discussion on GitHub, or maybe even in the next call. I just want to disambiguate those 2 points because they are individual points. Is that fair?
Yep, that's fair.
Yeah. Cool. JB, you want to spend a minute or 2 on the last bullet, and then we can call it a wrap for today?
I was actually going to tag Philip because I think he's been doing more. I actually have been working separately on my own little notebook for some analysis stuff, but I know Philip is actually working to get some actual teams to build some open source tools.
Yeah, there are 2 points. I'm just going to address them in the reverse. So kind of like on the latter, kind of like better comms and education. So there's going to be a landing page that is going to be hosted as a sub page on the Filecoin Foundation website. We're trying to get it up and running within the next week or 2. And that site will just kind of like summarize key information and properties of the program. We'll also have all the key links to the dashboard, to the GitHub repo, governance, and whatever else we think is important. If anyone has any recommendations or ideas of the type of information that we should summarize there, I'm happy to hear that. And so that will hopefully kind of like just explain or help make the whole process a little bit more transparent. We will also prepare a blog post that will just kind of like summarize and explain the role of the Filecoin Foundation. And I recognize that it may have been a little bit confusing that the foundation is sort of like, part of like the root key holder, and we're also, sort of like involved in kind of like, helping set up and manage the program, but we're also a notary. So we're going to be aiming to kind of just be completely transparent and address all of these open questions. And then sort of like on the first part, tooling to analyze the universal allocations. So the Filecoin Dev Grant program, which is administered through the foundation, has now been starting to work with a team. So we're just finishing up the spec. We're truly hoping to get it built as fast as possible, but will probably take a few more weeks. And I think one thing that I can do, also just in the sake of transparency, there's a public proposal for that initial piece of tooling that I can share later on Slack. And if you have any recommendations, also any kind of like wishes for features and so forth, then happy to kind of include and also try to like get that into like the first release. But again, kind of like all of that, kind of tooling and building that, this is the initial step, and we hope to kind of really progress and evolve over the course of the entire program. Questions?
That's great. Thanks, Philip. I think we can have people follow up with you in Slack too if they have any requests for grants or questions about how they can participate. Is that okay?
Totally works.
Cool. I think, JB, we should wrap it for today. We've got a couple of interesting topics still open. I think, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate open forum, open discussion, open-mindedness, and working towards building a more constructive and effective framework for making Filecoin useful. So thanks for that. Looking forward to continuing the conversation on many of these fronts. And thanks to the notaries that also spoke up a little bit today, shared their side of the story and their opinions, and we'd love to hear more of that in the coming weeks too, so we can continue to drive the overall accountability story in this space.
Also, thanks to all the Europeans who are up super late and the folks in China who are up super early. I know, Sonic, we did not get to the question that you had asked about the Show Foundation, but I'll add that to the list of the threads that we chat about in Slack, because I think the super large like upcoming DataCap things are going to be important as new use cases sort of onboard.
Okay, yeah, and I think this is topics where notaries has to work together and align if we want to all participate to this big clients DataCap allocation.
Yeah, +1.
Are you on a Clubhouse? We can do a Clubhouse.
You know, I wish they would send me an iPhone to participate. I would happily.
Deep, you can go get an iPhone.
I don't want an iPhone. I'm an Android fan.
Get an
Yeah.
iPad. That's what
Get
I
an
did. I
iPad.
got an iPad.
That's reasonable. See, that's a good actionable suggestion.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is all on recording. Everyone's gonna know.
Oh.
Oh, speaking of which, I'm going to, after this, I'm gonna request actually DataCap so I can start storing these meeting recordings. So if someone wants to maybe get a deal, I'm gonna make a request for DataCap and then try to store the videos for these on Filecoin. So I will put an RFP out there for a miner to come take my deal.